forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News. No spin, no bias, no censorship. I'm Dan Wootton, and breaking tonight, as much of the world weeps for Ukraine and its courageous President Volodymyr Zelensky.
We are fighting just for our land and for our freedom.
I'll have a special digest next on how deflated dictator Vladimir Putin has never looked more cowardly and pathetic in his shadow. I'll also get my Superstars panel take on the latest in Ukraine tonight. The Daily Star columnist Dawn Neeson, Conservative commentator Calvin Robinson, and author and journalist Rebecca Reid. As the bloodshed in Europe continues, we'll once again cross live to the insiders on the ground. In just a few moments, we'll check in with one of Ukraine's top news anchors, Mariska Pawlowska, who Putin tried to silence in a deadly missile attack on her channel's TV tower. And while it's currently too risky for her to turn on the lights in her secret location, Mariska will be here live next. She is truly fearless. Plus, at 10 p.m, we'll debate whether Putin should be silenced by social media as he launches a war on information. At 9:45, we'll meet Kara Rudka, the Ukrainian MP turned resistance fighter who's gone viral for her bravery and formidability. After at least 10 people tragically lost their lives in this horrific attack in Kharkiv, and at least 70 are reported dead in a strike in a military base just outside Ukraine's second city, in what's believed to be the single biggest loss of life yet, how are those in Kiev bracing themselves for a potential escalation in the capital? And at least 70 die, according to local authorities, in a strike on a military base just outside Ukraine's second city, in the biggest loss of life in the city there. So we will be crossing back to Ukraine. At 10:30, we'll hear from ex-military man Joe Sterling, who is flying out of the UK to fight against the Russians with fellow former British soldiers. After this desperate Ukrainian begged Boris for help.
I see that my family members, that my team members are saying that we are crying. We don't have where to run.
Should the UK and NATO grant President Zelensky's wish for a no-fly zone over Ukraine, despite concerns that it could trigger nuclear war? General Lord Dannatt, former head of the British Army, and Cormac Smith, former advisor to the Foreign Minister of Ukraine, weigh in. And I'll get your verdict too in the clash at 9:20. How much should we teach our kids about the war in Ukraine? Britain's strictest headmaster in social mobility czar, Catherine Birbalsingh, explains how you can keep your little ones informed without terrifying them. She's uncancelled at 10:50. And as Trump all but confirms, he will run for president again in 2024. Is the Donald in a stronger position than ever to reclaim the White House? GB News star Nigel Farage, who got all the insider info during their time together at CPAC in the US over the weekend, analyses his chances at 9:30. 9:30. Plus, we'll bring you a first look at how tomorrow's front pages cover the Ukraine crisis throughout the 10-hour. And as ever, I'll crown a new Greatest Britain and Union jackass before the end of the show. This is Dan Wootton tonight. Let's go. Just one thing first, though. More unthinkably horrific images of war have emerged out of Ukraine. Remember, a modern European democracy in the past 24 hours as satellite images continue to show a Russian military convoy advancing towards the Ukrainian capital, Kiev, stretching for miles, and we will be live in the capital shortly. Early today, footage released by state emergency services in Ukraine showed the moment an apparent Russian missile attack struck an administration building in Kharkiv, the country's second largest city. We'll be live to there in our 10 p.m. hour. This evening, Russian missiles targeted the capital city's TV tower for broadcaster 1+1, reportedly killing 5 people in the process. One of that channel's biggest stars will be with us in just a moment to reveal their battle to stay on air and inform under-attack Ukrainians. So we're going to have uncensored analysis from top journalists and commentators over the next 2 hours, plus all the breaking news the moment it happens. But first, the news headlines with Rhiannon Jones.
Thank you, Dan. Here are your top stories from the GB newsroom. At least 5 people have been killed in a Russian attack on a television tower in the Ukrainian capital of Kiev. In Ukraine's second largest city, Kharkiv, at least 10 people have been killed and 35 wounded in rocket strikes by Russian forces today. The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has told Russia it must stop bombing his country before peace talks can start.
In order to sit down for talks, one cannot sit down when planes are flying over and bombardment is going on. To sit behind a table, the sides have different positions, one that wants to put pressure, one that doesn't want to reach an agreement. We are for dialogue, yes, but the least that must happen is the bombardment of people must stop.
Foreign Secretary Liz Truss has announced sanctions against Belarus for the country's involvement in Russia's invasion. Ukraine's defense intelligence claims there are around 300 Belarusian tanks on its border. It says Russia's preparing a deliberate provocation to justify their entry. Speaking at the Tapa military base in Estonia earlier, Boris Johnson said President Putin had made a disastrous miscalculation in invading, and he confirmed the UK won't be sending troops to Ukraine.
I want to be crystal clear, finally, on that point. We will not fight Russian forces in Ukraine, and our reinforcements, like these reinforcements here in Tapa, are firmly within the borders of NATO members, and they are profoundly the right thing to do.
The United Nations says more than 660,000 refugees have already fled to neighbouring countries. Home Secretary Priti Patel told MPs earlier that more Ukrainians will be eligible to seek refuge in the UK. Via an expansive Ukrainian family scheme, British nationals will now be able to bring in adult parents, grandparents, children over 18 and siblings.
Those joining family in the UK will be granted leave for an initial period of 12 months. They will be able to work and access public funds. Secondly, we will establish a humanitarian sponsorship pathway, which will open up a route to the UK for Ukrainians who may not have family ties with the UK.
From today, train ticket prices in England and Wales are 3.8% more expensive. That's the biggest rise in rail fares in 9 years. The Campaign for Better Transport says the hike couldn't come at a worse time for commuters. And Southend has officially become a city today. On behalf of the Queen, Prince Charles presented the letters patent during a ceremony that formally granted its city status. The late Conservative MP for Southend, Sir David Amess, had campaigned for this before he was stabbed to death in October last year. TV Online and DAB+ Radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Dan Wootton tonight.
Over the past week, we have seen two very different types of leadership that are probably summed up best by these photographs. There's that prissy pussy Putin who sees himself as a real man, but is so terrified of catching the Omicron virus, which actually in most cases is a minor cold, and our 95-year-old Queen has just breezed through it. But he's so terrified that he sits miles away from even his own generals who have been tested and had to go through some sort of sanitation tunnel before even being in this dictator's presence. From his bunker, the paranoid COVID hysteric madman is lashing out at his closest advisors over the lackluster mission in Ukraine so far. So what does he do? Well, he bombs from his bubble. He bombs civilians. He murders children in cold blood. He breaks international law. He uses vacuum bombs that suck in oxygen to generate a high temperature explosion that set off a pressure wave, rupturing the lungs of its victims. Putin thinks he's untouchable, of course, but ordinary Russians risking it all to protest on the streets of 32 cities show that many of his own citizens are aghast. A bloke who used to try and show his strength by riding topless on horseback and coming face to face with tigers in the wild is a boxed-in coward with a Botoxed face who is fast losing the faith of his generals and his people. He's already lost the West, who thought he'd be the man to modernise Russia, but now view him as a despotic war criminal. Then there's Volodymyr Zelensky, a 44-year-old former TV comedian and actor who had fame in Russia and millions in the bank before surprisingly entering public service in 2019, winning a democratic election with a 73% share of the vote. He has remained in Kiev, even though there is a Russian execution order hanging over his head, and there are already 400 mercenaries from the Wagner Group operating the city, just waiting for an opportunity to kill him. But still, he fights on. Zelensky, in my opinion, has shown the world true leadership. And he isn't going anywhere. He'd rather die alongside his citizens than jump on an American helicopter out of the capital. No wonder the translator broadcasting Zelensky's remotely broadcast speech to the EU today got all choked up.
We are fighting just for our land and for our freedom, despite the fact that all large cities of our country are now blocked. Every square of today, no matter what it's called, it's going to be called, as today, Freedom Square in every city of our country. Yesterday, 16 children were killed. Again and again, President Putin is going to say that is some kind of operation and we are hitting a military infrastructure. He killed 16 people just yesterday.
Now, I do appreciate that much is lost or misinterpreted in the fog of war. And there, as you would expect in any war, propaganda coming from both sides. But what we know is that Putin has launched an illegal invasion that has killed many Ukrainian citizens. And we know the Russian onslaught is slowly strangling Kiev, where Zelensky remains. His survival is critical for the world of the future, because I think Zelensky is the real leader. Putin is a child-killing coward. And breaking tonight, Russian forces fired at the Kiev TV tower, which broadcasts the channel 1+1, among other civilian sites targeted on the 6th day of the Russian invasion. The strikes on the tower killed 5 people and left 5 more wounded, according to Ukraine's State Service for Emergency Situations. The city authorities have promised to fix the damage as soon as possible and resume broadcasting. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky tweeted to say the bombs dropped on the same site as the Babanya, where nearly 34,000 Jews were killed by the Nazis in 1941. Today, a Holocaust memorial stands there. Now, we're joined once again by one of Ukraine's top broadcasters, Mariska Paldalka. She is a presenter at 1+1, whose TV reception aerial was bombed by Putin today. But Mariska has been able to keep broadcasting across Ukraine from a secret location. So Putin has been thus far unable to force the network off air. Mariska, how devastating was that moment today when you saw the video of your TV transmission tower being bombed?
It was. It still feels very devastating, and I would mention that it's not only transmitting signal for 1+1, but actually for all Ukrainian channels, not only for 1+1, and. Working at a backup studio, it doesn't mean it's a place where you can still work, but it doesn't mean that that's a place where you can still transmit a signal. The facilities were ruined for a moment, and for some time we were just blacked out. And I heard that you're going to talk about what British children are to learn from the tragedy that we're having in Ukraine right now. But maybe there is a point for British journalists to learn from our experience, and I would certainly recommend to have very strong social media, because the first thing that I've done after our signal was cut off is to go to the social media and to tell people what's going on, because we had some intelligence in the very morning that our communications and TV signals are going to be attacked, and people will be informed that the Ukrainian president and the Ukrainian government surrendered, so that they would feel demoralized, and we were warning our audience that that is going to happen, and it actually did. So I think social media and some alternative ways of communicating to your audience is crucial nowadays. So that's my biggest recommendation, I think, to you. Hopefully it never happens in your country. And as I said, we were expecting the attack, that our TV stations will be attacked, and we had a backup plan to resume, and hopefully within a few hours all TV stations will be transmitting their signals again. And as I said, yesterday, we now united in one channel so that we don't use so many resources, which we don't have now, because some people had to leave, some people are staying with their kids. So we just allocated different slots. Channels,
and that does make sense. So, Mariska, at your secret location, do you feel safe? Do you feel protected? And where are your children at the moment?
I feel safe. I'm not staying with my children. All my family is in Ukraine. My husband is with the army. I'm with my colleagues, and my parents are with my children, and we're all in Ukraine in different places, which is also a little bit difficult at such difficult times, not seeing each other. But the only thing we care now about is to survive, and for our country to survive, you know.
I know. You're an amazing woman, Mariska, and you're an amazing family. Obviously, regular viewers will know that your husband is a former MP who's now joined the army as a reservist and is currently fighting. So, Mariska, can you talk to us about the situation on the ground in Kiev at the moment? I know there is this citywide curfew. Are you expecting a major bomb attack from Russia overnight?
They just began, as you were announcing our interview a few minutes ago, in different districts of Kiev, and that's why I'm really concerned what's going on and what targets are being hit tonight. I think it's going to be some crucial days. Today and tomorrow, as you understand, Putin failed to capture Kyiv within a few days as he planned, and the level of resistance has been enormous. And every day we have new and new people coming back to the country, especially male, and mainly women and children are leaving, and men are coming back, including celebrities. And
And Mariska, what's the latest on Zelensky? Do you know where Zelensky is, and are you convinced that he is going to stay put in Kiev as he says he will?
Absolutely. I'm absolutely convinced he is not going to leave. And I mean, I know he's in the capital, and as I saw your colleagues from CNN just a few hours ago who had a chance to interview him, he said he is in the center of the city, and that's what I was able to tell. So he is in the center of the city.
Mariska, all I can say is we are all praying for you. We're praying for your family. We're praying for your husband. We're praying for your city. We're praying for your country. Good luck, and we'll talk next week.
We promise to win, you know.
You do. You do.
See you.
That's Mariska Pawdelka, presenter of Ukraine's biggest TV network, 1+1. My superstar panel here now, former editor at the Daily Star, Dawn Neeson, the Conservative commentator, Calvin Robinson, and the author and journalist, Rebecca Reed. Dawn, what do you make of it all?
It's just heartbreaking, isn't it? You just can't believe what you're watching. I mean, incredibly brave people that, you know, that are staying there and fighting for their country. And I do wonder whether we would have the guts to do that in this country. But the image I keep coming back to today was the little girl that was on the front of the Sun newspaper, 10 years old, murdered in cold blood with her mum and dad while she sat in the car. Now, Putin is a, 69-year-old man allegedly, who was so threatened by a 10-year-old Ukrainian schoolgirl that he wanted her dead. This is the images that you take from war, isn't it? It's not the politics, it's not the hardware, it's not the stats, it is the children. It's that little girl's face will stay with us forever, and how, you know, and Putin's got children, he's got grandchildren. How he can have this done in his name is utterly beyond me, Dan. I can't believe it.
And Rebecca, it's just very hard to get your head around. I mean, Mariska last week was broadcasting as normal. She was with her family, happy family. Her husband is now on the front line with one gun. He literally has a few weeks of military training. Who knows if he will return? Her parents looking after her children. I mean, this is the reality of war, and we can't look away from that.
Yeah, this is why I'm not a newsreader, because I'm incapable of keeping it together. Because I was just watching that, being like, that's just so... Sorry. Sorry, and then it doesn't help me in my nice TV studio with you guys crying about it.
But it is heartbreaking.
But I don't know how people cope. I genuinely don't. How do you do that? How do you send your kids to go to be with your parents and then say goodbye to your husband and then keep working? I don't know how she does it, genuinely.
Well, they're an incredibly brave people, aren't they, Calvin? And this is something about the Ukrainians. You know, they talk about streets filled with blood because you go right back to World War II and they suffered bigger losses per capita than any country. So this is a remarkable people. And whatever you think about the ins and outs of this situation, the Ukrainians, they are going to fight for this country, aren't they?
They're bold and they're brave, and it's fantastic to see civilians standing up for their country, picking up arms and going to war for their country, whether they're in the military or not. That is great to see. I don't know if we'd see the same in this day and age in our country, unfortunately.
I don't think we would. I really don't. I don't think I know anyone who has that level of strength. I know I don't.
It's old school, and I think it shows the different situation that they have grown up in.
But at the same time, you know, war is wicked, and we have to condemn this illegal invasion, absolutely. But we can't get distracted. Zelensky and Putin are both members of the WEF. You know, every channel, every programme is talking about this at the moment. What's happening with Canadian truckers? What's happening with the Pfizer data drop that's coming out today? What's happening with the Police and Crimes Commission bill that was pushed through Parliament last night that restricts our right to protest in this country? Our government and our powers are getting away with a lot because all of the attention is on Russia and Ukraine right now. We must question that as much as anything else.
But Dawn, we have to talk about this at the moment, don't we?
Oh,
because of the absolute atrocities. And obviously, look, there are lots of news judgments to be made. People have criticised me across the week because I have spoken about other stories as well, because I think it is important, as Calvin says, that we have to keep an eye on everything happening across the globe. But this is the first invasion by a superpower of a sovereign nation in 80 years. And if we don't stop this in some way, we don't know where it's going to end.
This is a 2.5-hour flight away from here, Dan. This is not some far-flung corner of the world. These people are us. But as you point out, they wouldn't, you know, I keep going back to my friend who's a hairdresser.
Well, they want to be us, don't they?
Yeah, but
and that's what's
absolutely.
tragic. They want to be us. They want to disconnect from
My friend
the
who's a
Soviet
hairdresser out in the capital city at the moment. A few months ago, she was doing highlights. Now she's making Molotov cocktails in her kitchen to go and fight for her capital city. And, you know, she is not alone. So many brave people. We have to talk about this. We have to support them.
And Rebecca, the bravery of Zelensky is extraordinary, because even though as president, like most people who get into power, he hasn't been able to do everything that he promised. Corruption before the invasion was still rife in Ukraine. But I just keep thinking about the fact this is a guy who had millions in the bank. He had a huge career in Russia. He has villas in Italy, and it was just love of country that in 2019 made him run for the presidency. He was dismissed as a joke by the West, of course, but he won with a 73% landslide majority. Now, he's not a politician, and I think the fact he's not a politician is probably the reason why he told the Americans to go and take your helicopter away and I'm going to stay here with my people.
But then I think there is a fundamental truth in the fact that the worst qualified people to do politics are people who are good at politics. And the better you are at winning elections and schmoozing people and all that stuff, the worse you are at actually getting things done. I will fully admit, I don't know much about his career previous to this, but I would say I don't think Boris Johnson, Keir Starmer, Donald Trump, Joe Biden, any of those people would still be in the centre of Kiev. I can't think of any politicians either side of the political divide who would be there right now.
I'll add Macron and Trudeau to your list.
No, they wouldn't either, but none of them. Can you name anybody else who would be?
No, and I mean, Kelvin, the threat to his life is acute. I mean, this is not some small chance thing. There are currently 400 mercenaries for the Wagner Group out to kill him in Kiev. Now, that's before any of the Russian army have even arrived. And that's why Putin just makes me sick, because he is actually a weak man. He's a weak man with nukes. But look at him sitting there, Calvin, with his generals metres and metres away down the other side of the table because he's so terrified of catching Omicron. And then look at Zelensky staying put. It is certainly a contrast in leadership, is it not?
Yes, but I'm cautious of this heroes and villains game that we're playing. I think we're seeing them as caricatures. And a lot of the data that we're seeing, you know, a lot of the information we're seeing on both sides is proving to be propaganda that's debunked. You know, I saw an aircraft being taken down that looked very much like footage from a video game that I've played called Arma 3. We've seen photographs that are old and recycled being put out as if this is what's happening now. So I'm just very cautious about celebrating anyone as a hero in this at the moment.
I think also there's a sort of there's like a kind of almost fictionalisation of Zelensky, and I was watching it thinking I can just see the film they're going to make. And I think sometimes it makes us feel good to see someone being a hero and doing an amazing job, but that's actually this is still a bad situation.
He is being a hero. He is being a hero.
He shouldn't need to be. It's still bad times. We shouldn't get joy out of watching
Well, no, of course, and I'm not getting joy out of any of this, but he didn't ask for this situation. At the end of the day, his manifesto was to try and secure peace with Russia. I'm sorry, Putin is evil for what he's doing, and I agree, and that's why I made the point in my digest about propaganda coming from both sides. But I actually think it is very easy in this case to see a villain and to see a hero. And that's not to say Zelensky is a perfect man. Of course he's not a perfect man, but when leaders are tested, that's, I think, when you see his true colours. And he could have been out of there.
Also, he is a fantastic example of when people talk about masculinity and the crisis of masculinity. He is an amazing example of positive masculinity. We talk a lot about toxic masculinity. This is the opposite of that. And it's lovely to see that celebrated for a bit.
And can we just mention the wife who was there with him
Oh
as well,
my God,
by
she's
his
amazing.
side?
Of course, Rebecca Reed, Dawn Neeson, Calvin Robertson, my superstar panel. Thank you so much. Coming up, with the Ukraine crisis proving we need powerful leaders in the West, is Donald Trump in his strongest position yet to reclaim the White House? One of the men who knows him best, Nigel Farage, weighs in. But next, with its critics claiming it could trigger nuclear war, should the UK and NATO grant President Zelensky's wish for a no-fly zone over Ukraine? General Lord Dannatt, former head of the British Army, and Cormac Smith, former advisor to the Foreign Minister of Ukraine, debate in the clash. This is a fraught topic of global significance. I know opinions are strongly divided, so please let me know what you think. Dan@gbnews.uk. Tweet me using the handle @gbnews. And we've got a poll running there too. I will bring you your results after the break.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News. Nigel Farage is next, but now it's time for the clash. And breaking tonight, the Ukrainian government is in talks with allies over how to support its air defences, the country's Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba has announced. The news comes after Ukrainian World Economic Forum global leader and Anti-Corruption Action Centre co-founder and executive director Daria Kaleniuk confronted Prime Minister Boris Johnson at a press briefing in Poland earlier today, demanding that Britain and NATO allies enforce a no-fly zone over her country.
Ukrainian people are desperately asking for the West to protect our sky. We are asking for the no-fly zone. We are saying in response that it will trigger World War III. But what is the alternative, Mr. Prime Minister? Britain guaranteed our security under Budapest Memorandum. So you're coming to Poland. You're not coming to Kiev, Prime Minister. You're not coming to Lviv. Because you're afraid. Because NATO is not willing to defend. Because NATO is afraid of the World War III. But it is already started. And these are Ukrainian children who are there taking the hit. Putin's children are in Netherlands, in Germany, in mansions. Where are all these mansions seized? I don't see that. I see that my family members, that my team members are saying that we are crying. We don't have where to run.
This is how the PM responded.
Look, I just want to say that I'm acutely conscious that there is not enough that we can do as the UK government to help in the way that you want. And I've got to be honest about that. As I said to Volodymyr Zelensky, I think a couple of times, unfortunately, the implication of that is that the UK and would be engaged in shooting down Russian planes, would be engaged in direct combat with Russia. That's not something that we can do or that we've envisaged.
And yesterday, the Ukrainian President Zelensky also urged Western countries to consider a no-fly zone after he accused Russia of committing war crimes. Critics and Western leaders have argued that any direct military intervention with Russia could lead to a full-blown conflict in Europe, marking the start of World War III and raising the possibility of nuclear warfare. But with the death toll of Ukrainian civilians estimated to be at least 102, according to the UN, with fears of more brutal fighting to come, should the UK and its NATO allies grant President Zelensky's wish for a no-fly zone over Ukraine? Dan at gbnews.uk is my email. Tweet me at gbnews, and we've got a poll running there now too. But to debate this, to help you make up your mind, I'm joined by the former advisor to Ukraine's ex-Foreign Minister Cormac Smith and former Chief of the General Staff for the United Kingdom, General Lord Dannatt. Lord Dannatt, you agree with Boris Johnson that a no-fly zone is simply not a wise idea?
Yes. If you're looking for clear answers to straightforward questions, the answer is I do agree. I can understand entirely why there is a case to be made for a no-fly zone. But if there is going to be a no-fly zone, if it's going to be more than a matter of words, it has to be air policed, which means that NATO aircraft, British aircraft, American aircraft, German aircraft, anybody else's aircraft in NATO has got to police that airspace. And as soon as that is contested with a Russian, Belarusian, or other Russian sympathizing aircraft, and there is aerial combat, then the war has immediately been escalated. Now, I have huge sympathy for all that Ukraine and Ukrainians are doing. I have abject criticism for the disgraceful way that Vladimir Putin is behaving and the actions of the Russian forces supposedly in his name. But frankly, it is not in our wider interest. And I'm really sorry this sounds harsh to the Ukrainians, who are wonderful people and fighting brilliantly, but it's not in the wider interest of European peace or world peace to go down the track of saying, we'll have a no-fly zone and we'll police it and we'll take the consequences of aerial combat. That is the route to escalation. That is ultimately the route with Vladimir Putin, who frankly is showing the very worrying signs of not just being a dictator, but a dictator who's pretty close to losing the plot, of actually getting quite close to that nuclear button. And frankly, in the wider world's interest, we just mustn't go there.
Cormac Smith, obviously from a Ukrainian perspective, you strongly disagree.
Well, no, not strongly, actually. I mean, up to a couple of days ago, I would have agreed with Lord Dannatt 100%. I've been doing media interviews across 6 countries for the last 6 weeks. I stopped counting after 50 interviews. Up to recently, my line was quite simple. It was 3 things. We need to arm the Ukrainians to the teeth, which the Brits have been leading the charge in doing. We need to sanction Russia back to the Stone Age, but we need to recognise that there's never going to be NATO boots on the ground or indeed in the air. And the Ukrainians agree with that. They don't expect it. They said, give us the weapons we need, do our own fighting. It was unthinkable to have the idea that we would send NATO on the ground and into the air. I'm afraid in the last few days, the unthinkable has happened. And I was speaking to friends just before I came out, terrified, hunkering down for the 3rd, 4th night in the middle of Kyiv. A very close friend, 48-year-old man with no military training, has said, that's it, I'm going out to join the local defence forces. And I'm hearing from people in Kyiv all the time. So the unthinkable has now happened with the beginning of this genocidal attack and numerous suggestions, and it's early days yet, of war crimes. But we know Putin has absolutely no compunction in murdering tens of thousands of innocent people. He's done it in Aleppo and he has done it in Grozny. And the problem with Putin is, yes, he's a psychopathic thug. He is also a bully. And bullies don't like a fair fight. And Putin has found out very, very clearly in the last few days that he cannot take the Ukrainians on in anything approaching a fair fight. So he has therefore, and I've been saying this for a number of days, my great fear was what he would start to do. He would start the more indiscriminate bombing of civilian areas, which indeed he is doing. And it's absolutely frightening on behalf of my many great friends and my Ukrainian brothers and sisters, what he is actually capable of doing. And we see this 40-mile convoy heading into Kyiv. So I'm afraid...
Indeed, yes, and who knows where that's going to go. Lord Dannatt, is there a point that the issue is both Biden and Johnson have taken further military action off the table, including the no-fly zone, so he can do what he wants, right?
No, he can't really do what he wants, right? what he is doing is actually fundamentally wrong. And he and those who are his military commanders who are carrying out his orders will, in the fullness of time, and the price has to be paid, I'm afraid, by Ukrainian people, but the price that's got to be paid eventually by those Russian leaders, evidence is being gathered of the war crimes they are committing, and if any of them survive this, they will go to a war crimes tribunal and they will follow the same fate that others who have gone to war crimes tribunals have followed. The Mladics, the Kirstich, the Radovans of this world. They will go there.
Dan, could I put in at this point,
gathering
please?
evidence. Now, it doesn't help the people in Kyiv tonight. It doesn't help the people in Ukraine tonight. But
sorry, I'm going to cut in at this point. It is not, we in the West do not have the right to stand by and say it's unfortunate, this will take time, and the poor Ukrainians are going to have to pay the price. I have been saying for over a week now, I have been predicting, because I lived among these people for 2 years. It's no surprise to me the fight they have put up. But what I've been saying for the last week, I will predict Putin will never have Ukraine, because they will fight to the last bullet and the last drop of blood. But my great fear is how many tens of thousands of innocent people will pay the price to prevent him. And we simply do not have the right in the West to say, well, it's unfortunate, as you have said, Lord Dannett, that the Ukrainians are going to have to pay the price. This is, and Lord Dannett, you said this morning when you spoke to ITV that this was the most dangerous point in your 71 years on this planet. Well, I'm a little bit younger than you. I've been 59 years on this planet, and I've been saying that for some time. Our Prime Minister said on Sunday and reiterated again today that this was the closest he had seen in his lifetime to an absolute battle between good and evil. This is our 1939 moment. The only difference is, in 1939, Hitler did not have 6,500 nuclear warheads.
OK, Lord Dannett, final word to you, because that's obviously something you need to respond to.
But Vladimir Putin does have 6,500 nuclear warheads at his disposal, and the Russian military use of nuclear warheads is not like ours in the West, that we keep a distinction between conventional and nuclear. They are quite prepared to use nuclear weapons at a lower tactical level, and the danger of escalation is huge. It is a tragedy, a total tragedy, what is happening. But I'm afraid I cannot be, and Boris Johnson and Joe Biden and other Western leaders cannot be swayed by the emotion of doing something that actually is potentially more dangerous, more escalatory, and could result in not thousands or tens of thousands, but frankly, millions of people being killed, and potentially the end of our way of life, this planet, as we know it. We have got to realize...
Sorry, Dan, I've got to get in with one last point. I lived through the 80s through MAD, mutually assured destruction, and it was not as scary as the point we're at now. Quite frankly, we have nuclear arsenals in the West. I'll go back to quite happily living with MAD to stand by and defend the Ukrainian people from the genocide which has been threatened upon them now. We have a moral duty in the West to stand by.
If you're going to end this discussion, I'll end it on one word from me. During the period of mutual assured destruction, we could understand and guarantee there were rational leaders on both sides. There is not a rational leader in the Kremlin.
There's not
That
right
is
now.
the real
Unfortunately, I agree with you, Lord Dannett, on that.
Good to end on a note of agreement, and we'll continue talking to both of you, of course. You have very important views over the next few weeks. That's General Lord Dannett, former head of the British Army, and the former advisor to Ukraine's ex-Foreign Minister Cormac Smith. I so appreciate it. So who do you agree with? Well, Eddie on Twitter says, I hate to say this, but the current situation, a regional war, no matter how bad it unfortunately may become, is preferable to the global war a NATO no-fly zone would almost immediately trigger. So nasty though it is, we currently have the lesser of two evils. Consider that. Brian on Twitter questions, if they're going to do a no-fly zone, it would be better to send ground troops too. A no-fly zone still brings open war with Russia. Why go only halfway? And from Bob on email, we should not involve ourselves directly. The fog of war is fed by sophisticated propaganda on both sides. And your verdict is now in. 32% of you agree that NATO and the UK should grant Zelensky a no-fly zone over Ukraine, while 68% of you say they should not. Coming up, we meet the Ukrainian MP readying herself, gun in hand, to repel the Russian invaders from the streets of Kiev. Cannot wait. That's at 9:45. But first, after he all but confirms he is running for president again in 2024, is Trump a shoo-in for the White House? Nigel Farage has got the inside scoop. He'll be here straight after the break.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate.
From all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
Make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel.
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News. Time for What the Farage now, and over the weekend, top Republicans from around the US gathered at the Political Action Conference in the lockdown-free state of Florida on the banner of, and I like this, awake, not woke. But the biggest news out of CPAC was Donald Trump's near solid confirmation that he will run for president in 2024.
The radical left is exposed, they're weak, and their pathetic policies have been out there long enough now that we don't want them, we'll never take them. The socialists, globalists, Marxists, and communists who are attacking our civilization have no idea of the sleeping giant they have awoken. But they're going to find out the hard way starting on November 8th, and then again even more so on November 2024. We did it twice, and we'll do it again. We're going to be doing it again a third time. And we will all continue together to make America great again.
Now, the informal straw poll on the last day of the conference only reaffirmed the former president's popularity. He glided to victory, with 59% of attendees saying they would vote for Trump if the election was held immediately, trumping other presidential hopefuls by a massive margin, with the Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and also impressive potential candidate at 28%, Mike Pompeo at just 2%. Front and centre to the historic moment was our GB News superstar Nigel Farage, who was attending CPAC, there he is, to give his own speech. And Nigel joins me now. Nigel, is Trump in a better position than ever to reclaim the White House?
Well, there are two things here, Dan, aren't there? Firstly, there is the nomination as the candidate for the Republican Party. For that, he's a shoo-in. There's no question about that. He is a complete shoo-in, although
even if
not
DeSantis
insignificant that Ron DeSantis, is coming up towards a third of the vote.
Yeah.
So it's a two-horse race, but Trump gets the nomination. Is he going to win back the White House, was your real question. If the election was tomorrow, it would be a massive margin of victory, even if there was some peculiarity on postal voting. 3 years from now is a long time. And let's face it, he is 75, so a lot will depend on his health. A lot will depend on how robust he is. But I think on some of the big issues, such as America's standing in the world, such as the southern border crisis. We think we've got a problem at Dover. There were 2 million people illegally crossed the border last year. And the key one, I think, that will come out from Ukraine as a major policy issue in America, and indeed it'll happen in our country too, is energy independence. Trump turned America into a net exporter of energy. Biden is taking it the other way. So for all those reasons, I think he's got every chance of winning in 2024, just with that caveat that a lot could happen in 3 years.
Now, Nigel, you speak about his health. He looked full of beans to me, but obviously you were up close and personal with him, chatting to his team. Is his health good?
Very, because he spent most of the time at Mar-a-Lago. He's not been under the constant barrage of criticism, false impeachments, Russia hoaxes, Mueller inquiries. What the man went through. I know what it's like to take stick. But,
you do.
What
yes,
he
you do.
withstood was astonishing. And he's playing golf every day. He's lost about 20 pounds. And yeah, he's full of vigour. In my speech, I did say one thing. I did say, you can't look back at November the 3rd, 2020 and keep talking about a stolen election. You have to look forwards and become the party for electoral reform. And that means paper ballots, voter ID. Now, the stolen election had become something of an article of faith for Republican activists. But I think I managed to talk them round. And when Trump spoke, for the first time, he did not say stolen election. He said rigged system. And he started to talk really positively about the Republicans being the party that would reform elections, so that never again would a significant chunk of Americans question election integrity. So I like to think, Dan, that I played my role a little bit there at CPAC. And, all elections, when you think about it, are fought on positives and negatives. There are visions for the future. There are attacks on the opposition. I believe that what America will look for, and I mentioned a few issues earlier. What about rising crime in America's cities? Huge rises in crime, particularly where the police have been defunded as a result of BLM. And on all of these issues, people don't want their kids being taught America's a dreadful country with a shameful history. You should be ashamed to be white. They don't want that. They want a fair America. They want a new version, a new vision of the American dream. And I genuinely, whatever flaws he may have, however unattractive he may be to some people, I think the values that he represents are ones that with good health and a following wind, will storm him back into the White House in 2024. And you know something? We as a country will then have a president that likes us, as opposed to this man, Biden, who can't stand us.
Very good note to end on. But he loves Ireland, doesn't he? He loves Ireland, just not the UK. Nigel Farage with a bold prediction. Of course, Nigel back 7 p.m. tomorrow night here on GB News. Thank you so much, Nigel. Now, coming up, why has Twitter allowed Vladimir Putin to remain on its platform after swiftly silencing the overmentioned Donald Trump? I'll debate that with my superstar panel in the Media Buzz at 10, where we'll also be reviewing the first of the papers on another tragic day of violence in Ukraine. But next, we'll meet one of the many heroes of Ukraine, the MP, who's gone from lawmaker to freedom fighter by joining her citizens and bearing arms. Don't miss that in just 2 minutes.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate.
From all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
Make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel.
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
That you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News. Breaking tonight, the Russian Defense Ministry has warned residents of Kiev of more airstrikes on the capital as an armoured vehicle convoy reported by a US technology company to be 40 miles long advances in what many fear will be the start of a bloody siege. Inside the city of 3 million, Ukrainians are building and manning checkpoints, helping to feed and supply resistance units and readying themselves to fight street to street against Putin's army. Well, joining me now is Ukrainian MP turned freedom fighter Kara Rudik. She's got herself a Kalashnikov, has been trained to use it, and her bravery has gone viral. Kara, wow, you are ready, you are prepared for the Russian onslaught, and you're going to fight.
I will. So, hello, good evening. We have been we're in war with Russia for 6 days right now, and we see that the stakes are raising, and there are more and more attacks on Ukrainian city. However, Putin is not able to take even one. So that's the result of the courage and bravery of Ukrainian people, of our ability to form the resistance and not only work as one nation, but also work as armed people who can protect what is theirs. I'm happy that I am able to train right now and be able to protect my family, my house, my city, and my country. So today,
Kara, are you scared?
I am very, very angry right now because for the last 6 days, I have seen my country being destroyed here and there, my cities being bombarded, and my children being evacuated as the children of Ukraine somewhere to the west because it's unsafe to be where I am right now. This is extremely unfair. This is something that should not be happening at the center of Europe with a democratic country who wants to join EU. This is just exactly the opposite of what should happen. Today, along with my resistance crew, we were patrolling the city to be able to see where the Russians could get in. And I could tell you that given the amount of forces that they're bringing into Kiev, right now we are preparing for a siege. We have enough of the food, water, and the other supplies gathered, so we will be able to sustain it, and Putin will fail at every step of his evil plan.
Kara, I think you're an incredible woman, and I have so much respect for the Ukrainian people, your patriotism and your lack of fear when it comes to standing up to Putin is extraordinary. Practically, what do you think is going to happen when this convoy gets to Kiev?
So first of all, our army is going to destroy it, half of it probably on the way. Second, they will try to siege the city, to surround it and make sure that there is a humanitarian catastrophe here. And this is why we are getting ready from our side. And this is why we will make sure that once the convoy is in, we will be able, as citizens of Kiev, will be able to destroy at least the pieces, the parts of it. Meanwhile, we are really hoping that sanctions would work and Putin will be more distracted on his internal situation rather than external. I want to remind you that only for 2 days the sanctions have been working, but it's already a problem for many Russians to use their credit cards, to withdraw dollars, to withdraw rubles. Ruble is down 3 times right now. So that's pretty painful for the country that was only feeding from the money of gas and oil. Actually,
no, I completely understand. And of course, a lot of Russians, millions of Russians, are aghast at what's happening. But Kara, can I just ask you, you are armed. If the Russian army come to your house and try and capture you as an MP, will you shoot to kill?
I will. I know that I'm on a Putin's kill list, and I totally understand what that means, especially that we have seen what Russian army can do because we are at war with Russia for the last 8 years. So we know what Russian soldiers are capable of. But I like to joke that I'm on a Putin's kill list, and on the same time I'm on Ukraine's top 10 bachelorette list, so these kind of evens it out.
Well, Kara Rudik, let me tell you, we are rooting for you. GBNews viewers are rooting for you. The UK is rooting for you, and the world is rooting for you. So stay strong, and my God, I wouldn't want to be the Russian soldier taking you on. Kara Rudik, thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's 10 p.m. I'm Dan Wootton, and breaking tonight as Putin launches a war against information, with Ukrainian officials reporting 5 dead in this shocking attack on a TV tower in Kiev. Is it time that the dictator is scrubbed from social media by Twitter, who, after all, was so quick to silence Donald Trump? Well, you know, I'm against censorship, but I just can't understand how Putin can have a platform on Twitter when the former US president remains banned. I'll debate that with my superstar panel, Daily Star columnist and former editor Dawn Neeson, conservative commentator Calvin Robinson, and author and journalist Rebecca Reed. After at least 10 people tragically lost their lives in this horrific attack in Kharkiv, and at least 70 have died in a strike on a military base just outside Ukraine's second city, in what's reported to be the single biggest loss of life yet. How are those in Kiev bracing themselves for a potential escalation in the capital? We'll speak to journalist Maria Pisarenko, who's been defying blackouts and bomb sirens. Updates from the city, and Denis Gangsa, a Ukrainian UN youth delegate who has no clue if his friends or home survived after he fled Kharkiv. Join me for that at 10:20. Are Brits who fly out to Ukraine and join the war against Russia brave or just plain reckless? Well, we'll hear from one of them. I can't wait. Former Scottish military man Joe Sterling, and we'll debate the topic at 10:32. How much should we tell our innocent kids about the conflict in Ukraine and fears of nuclear war? Well, Britain's strictest headmaster and social mobility czar, Catherine Berbising, explains how to have that difficult conversation in Uncancelled at 10:50. Plus, coming up next and throughout the hour, we'll analyse how tomorrow's newspapers are covering day 6 of the Ukraine crisis. And of course, before the end of the show, we'll pay tribute to the late Tory MP Sir David Amess as his dream of dedicating his life to finally making Southend a city becomes a reality. And I'll crown the next greatest Britain and Union Jackass as part of that too. But first, the news with Rhiannon Jones.
Dan, thank you. Here are your top stories from the GB newsroom. At least 5 people have been killed in a Russian attack on a television tower in the Ukrainian capital of Kiev. In Ukraine's second largest city, Kharkiv, at least 10 people have been killed and 35 wounded in rocket strikes by Russian forces today. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has told Russia it must stop bombing his country before peace talks can start.
In order to sit down for talks, one cannot sit down when planes are flying over and bombardment is going on. To sit behind a table, the sides have different positions, one that wants to put pressure, one that doesn't want to reach an agreement. We are for dialogue, yes, but the least that must happen is the bombardment of people must stop.
Volodymyr Zelensky there. Foreign Secretary Liz Truss has announced sanctions against Belarus for the country's involvement in Russia's invasion. Ukraine's defense intelligence claims there are around 300 Belarusian tanks on its border. It says Russia's preparing a deliberate provocation to justify their entry. Speaking at the TAP military base in Estonia earlier, Boris Johnson said President Putin had made a disastrous miscalculation in invading, and he confirmed the UK won't be sending troops to Ukraine.
To be crystal clear, finally, on that point. We will not fight Russian forces in Ukraine, and our reinforcements, like these reinforcements here in Tapa, are firmly within the borders of NATO members, and they are profoundly the right thing to do.
Wales First Minister Mark Drakeford says the country is ready to welcome Ukrainian refugees as he pledges £4 million in financial and humanitarian aid to Ukraine. The United Nations says more than 660,000 have already fled to neighbouring countries. Home Secretary Priti Patel told MPs earlier that more Ukrainians will be eligible to seek refuge in the UK. That's via an expansive Ukrainian family scheme. British nationals will now be able to bring in parents, grandparents, children over 18 and siblings.
Those joining family in the UK will be granted leave for an initial period of 12 months. They will be able to work and access public funds. Secondly, we will establish a humanitarian sponsorship pathway, which will open up a route to the UK for Ukrainians who may not have family ties with the UK.
Priti Patel there. From today, train ticket prices in England and Wales are 3.8% more expensive. That's the biggest rise in rail fares in 9 years. The Campaign for Better Transport says the hike couldn't come at a worse time for commuters. And Southend has officially become a city today. On behalf of the Queen, Prince Charles presented the letters patent during a ceremony that formally granted its city status. The late Conservative MP for Southend, Sir David Amess, had campaigned for this but was stabbed to death in October last year. TV online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Dan Wootton tonight.
Tomorrow's news tonight now in our media buzz. First front page hot off the press is the Metro, and they say shunned by the world. Let me just show it to you here. The world has shown its contempt for the country, with UN diplomats walking out of a conference as Vladimir Putin's foreign minister blamed Ukraine for its own invasion. More than 100 people left the room, but a handful on envoys, including from China, Syria and Venezuela, stayed to listen. Of course they did. My superstar panel back with me now, former editor of the Daily Star, Dawn Neeson, the Conservative commentator, Calvin Robinson, and the author and journalist, Rebecca Reid. breaking tonight. 5 people have died and 5 were injured in this Russian attack on the 1+1 TV tower in Kiev, according to Ukrainian officials. The structure, which for almost 40 years was the tallest of its kind in the world, was targeted as Putin stepped up his war on information after facing fierce resistance from within Ukraine and throughout the world. A rat like Putin is at home in the dark, and long before he ordered his troops into Ukraine, he silenced opposing voices by any means necessary. Why then is the Kremlin still allowed to directly communicate with the masses about the situation in Ukraine? That's Putin's somewhat breezy description of this unjust bloody war from the President of Russia account on Twitter. So Twitter have now started labelling posts linked to the Russian government, urging users to stay informed, while Facebook is among the platforms to have blocked states-backed media in the EU. But this is far from the direct hit we saw them take against Donald Trump last year, who was axed from both platforms following the Capitol riots, with Twitter citing the risk of inciting violence. Correct me if I'm wrong, isn't Putin actually committing heinous acts of violence? So why is Trump banned from Facebook until the risk of public safety has receded, when Putin is still allowed a voice on social media while putting global peace in jeopardy? And Calvin Robinson, can I just be very clear? I am actually not saying that I think the president of Russia should be banned from Twitter. What I'm saying is that Donald Trump should be reinstated immediately if they are prepared to leave the Kremlin and leave the Taliban on their woke platform. Oh, and by the way, the Chinese government and the Foreign Ministry of China, despite all of their actions towards the Uyghur Muslims.
No, I knew we'd be on the same page of this one, Dan. It's a clear hypocrisy on Twitter's part, but they shouldn't be closing down Russia, China and Afghanistan. What they should be doing is opening up Donald Trump, who wasn't inciting violence at all. And I know Rebecca's going to say the difference is that they were Trump was breaking Twitter's rules and Russia isn't, but that's not the case. These are controlling the pipelines of information. They're controlling what we see and what we don't see. That is so dangerous. I predicted.
Well, what were you going to say? What were you going to say?
Let them mansplain. Let them mansplain, Rebecca.
No, I'm not presuming for one moment I know what Rebecca's about.
We can just stick a blonde wig on Dan and then they don't even have to come in. So I completely understand why people think it's hypocritical, and I think it was, particularly when with the Taliban being on there, I do understand the frustration. My 2 defences of Twitter would be, it's not really a defence, but they're pretty bad about getting rid of people. I think we've probably all here been called terrible things on Twitter by people whose accounts were then allowed to stay on, because they have a process. I'm not sure it's a terribly good process, but they have a process of number of strikes of things you have to do before they want to get rid of you, and you have to tick certain boxes before you get removed. So that would be part of their defence. I also think the thing with Twitter is it's a company. They are allowed to set their own rules. They are allowed to decide what their rules are, and they are allowed to be hypocritical. If I have my own tech platform, I'm allowed to say everybody has to say Rebecca's amazing and anyone who doesn't can get banned.
But that is what it was about then, right? That is what it's about. They didn't get rid of Trump for inciting violence. They got rid of Trump because they wanted to steal his voice so that he could never become president again.
I wasn't part of the discussion to have Trump removed. I missed the woke meeting that week.
But it's more than being a private company. They have a monopoly on information at this point. That they should be broken down and/or regulated, because we have to break down monopolies. We cannot let them have all the power and dictate what's censored and what's not.
There's a conversation to be had about how that works in terms of big tech and how much responsibility they have to prevent this from happening. And I agree, Andrew Doyle makes a really good point that I would often say, if you don't like it, start your own one. But Andrew has often pointed out that they make it very difficult for you to get funding to start new platforms. And that, I think, is a problem.
Of course. And actually, they actively try and stop right-wing platforms from being able to.
Of course.
So, Dawn, you're the deciding vote on this. Where do you come to?
Well, speaking as someone who was actually put in Twitter jail once for talking about my cervix... not starting World War III, by the way, just talking about a woman's body. Twitter put me in jail for that because I offended somebody.
ironically, somebody in Germany, which I think is where Twitter is based. Isn't it based in Germany, I think?
Well, based in San Francisco.
Yeah,
but yeah. Presence.
Yeah, so in any case, I was put in Twitter jail because someone in Germany complained about me for talking about being a woman, not starting World War III. So the rules and regulations they run by, I have no idea what applies to what.
But it's terrifying, and I think the reason it's terrifying, Calvin, and I want to be very clear when I'm having this discussion, because it's not that I'm calling for further censorship, but the problem is that's where the debate goes, and that is always where the debate was going to go, because you will get a lot of people on the left who think that Putin shouldn't have a platform, who think the Taliban shouldn't have a platform, and so you start down this very slippery slope.
Yeah, it's Big Brother. It's 1984. How do we find out what's going on in the world if we can't discern the information for ourselves? We need transparency. We need to see from both sides of the arguments and then have the ability to make our
But
own
at the moment, it's a predominantly privately owned or run company where they get to set their own rules.
That's the problem.
And possibly there is a bigger discussion to be had about it, but it's not an international service.
Although you look at the media in the UK, for example, and ITV, which is a private company, Channel 5, which is a private company, has a whole load of regulations that they have to follow. Now, again, I don't agree with that, but private companies don't just get a right to do whatever they want in the media space.
Then you have to ask the worst question ever, possibly, which is what are the rules of the internet? Who owns the internet? What's the jurisdiction of the internet? That's the worst discussion
Which is why, by the way, Twitter should just not censor anyone, and they don't need to like having people on their platform. They don't have to like having Donald Trump on there.
I don't think you think that, because if somebody is using Twitter to abuse you or me or Calvin or Dawn or anybody else every single day, then they shouldn't be allowed to...
I think if they're breaking the law, the police should be able to force a social media
Last time someone high-profile attacked me on Twitter, I supported their right to do so because it's their free speech.
But there's a difference.
That we're defending. But if someone's breaking the law, then they should be taken off.
Yeah, exactly. So if they're threatening violence, if they're using it to threaten to kill you, for example.
But not necessarily saying they're going to kill you, but saying horrible things to you every single day that aren't elite. I'm not going to kill you, but saying personal, nasty, scary, upsetting things.
My Twitter jail example, I mean, I was put in Twitter jail for saying what I said, and yet the person that complained about me also threatened to rape me, even though she was a she, evidently, but threatened to rape me at the same time.
Which is a crime.
And they were still on Twitter.
Yeah, and that's the irony. That's the irony. Look, proof, as if it were ever needed, that the SNP are totally clueless. As President Zelensky applied for EU membership yesterday in a last-ditch attempt to secure assistance for his imperiled citizens, the SNP MSP, Michelle Thompson, thought it was appropriate to post this outrageous tweet. Delighted for Ukraine. It just goes to show what political will can achieve. Remember this, Scotland. I mean, what a ridiculous and downright insulting conflation of the war in Ukraine and Scottish independence, politicising tragedy to further a self-harming cause that there is still no real demand for. I mean, I just think it's vile. Thompson did later delete the tweet and apologise, admitting the comparison had been insensitive, but it really does attest to the toxic nature of nationalism in Scotland. And finally, we could all do with a bit of good news in these bleak times. So I'm relieved that I can declare, hallelujah, rejoice, the Queen has officially recovered from COVID, while the pathetic Putin is terrified of catching Omicron. That's why he sits down the other end of the table from all of his generals. Our 95-year-old monarch took a little over a week to fully recover from the virus. It's a minor cold, folks. And she's now back to work, hosting 2 virtual engagements at Buckingham Palace today. What an inspirational woman. Long may she reign. And there's no shirking off work for her, even at 95. Dawn Neeson, Calvin Robinson, Rebecca Reid, do stand by. Because coming up, after President Zelensky made his dramatic call for foreign volunteers, we speak to one of the Brits heading to Ukraine to defend the country against Russian invaders. That's at 10:30. But next, how are those in Kiev bracing themselves for a potential escalation in the capital? We'll speak to a brave journalist who's been defying blackouts and bomb sirens to provide updates from the capital, and a Ukrainian UN youth delegate who has no clue if his friends or home survived after he fled under fire Kharkiv. They're both straight after the break.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate.
From all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
Make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel.
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News. Breaking tonight, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has accused Russia of war crimes after airstrikes, including on a central square in the country's second city. According to Ukrainian officials, at least 10 people were killed and 35 hurt when the Opera House, concert hall and government offices were hit in Freedom Square in Kharkiv. The main TV tower in the capital, Kiev, was hit in a separate attack, putting media off air and reportedly killing 5 people. In an eerily symbolic blow, a nearby memorial to victims of the Holocaust was damaged. The Babin Yar ravine is Europe's largest mass grave of the Holocaust, where between 70,000 and 100,000 people, mostly Jews, were shot by Nazis. Taking to Twitter, President Zelensky condemned the attack as history repeating itself, writing, "What is the point of saying never again for 80 years if the world stays silent when a bomb drops on the same site of Babin Yar?" Well, I'm joined now by Ukrainian journalist Maria Pisarenko, who is in Kiev, and Denis Ganza, the Ukrainian UN youth delegate who has just managed to escape Kharkiv and is now also in Kiev. It's just after 11 p.m. in the capital, with the city under curfew since 8 p.m, literally awaiting more Russian attacks. So, Denis, let me kickstart with you, because you have obviously managed to escape Kharkiv. What was the situation like? Because, of course, that bombing looked incredibly dramatic.
So I wouldn't say good evening to you, because it's really not good for most of my friends. I don't know if most of them are alive. I don't know if I have a flat anymore. And it's really like your friends in the previous studio said that we should have opposite view on this from Russia. Really? You should not have this. Block them everywhere. Don't speak to them. They're barbarians. This is for sure. As for me, I really managed to escape Kharkiv with the last evacuation train just on the second day of war. And it's really hard to see what is happening there.
How did you get out, Denis?
We had the evacuation train. It was the last train from Kharkiv for now. It's really, as I'm talking to you, I'm getting the news from Kharkiv. We are like, I'm telling you, this is barbaric. And there is nothing human in this. And if you can, and you can, I know, don't even talk to them. don't even think of working with them, don't even have any business with them. They must be isolated and punished for everything they have done.
Indeed. And Denis, obviously you've gone from Kharkiv, but you're in Kiev now, which is arguably more dangerous a place to be.
Yes, so this decision was made by me on the second day of war, because I wanted to help my capital to survive. I didn't know that there will be such a severe bombardment from Russian troops in Kharkiv, because Putin at some point promised to protect Russian-speaking people. I am Russian-speaking, I'm not protected anymore. So I came to Kyiv just to be sure that I'm helping my president, helping my government. I'm working 24 hours per 7, be sure, and we will be working until the victory. Be sure, we are not accepting any Russian terms. We are not accepting surrender. We are not accepting the world to forgive them. We are not accepting the world not to isolate them.
No, and I hear that loud and clear, and I think the Ukrainian spirit during this has been truly inspirational. Maria Pisarenko, you have been reporting for us all week from Kiev. Where are you tonight? What's the situation on the ground? And what are you expecting over the next few hours?
Right now it's already past midnight here in Kyiv, and I am spending this night on the platform of metro station University. It's Old Town Kyiv, and right here I'm with dozens of other Kyivans who are hiding here for the night, using this metro station as a bomb shelter, just sleeping, trying, to have a casual night, drinking tea or water, and just pretending that everything is fine. So just to prove you that I'm really in the metro station, you can see behind me the wagon, the parts of it. So it's blue and yellow. This is how.
Maria, did you ever in your wildest dreams ever imagine that you would, in 2022, be shielding from Russian bombs in a underground station? I mean, it must feel completely surreal to you.
Yeah, right. All this evening and all the past 6 days have been kind of surreal for all of Ukrainians, people in Kyiv, not only in Kyiv, in Kharkiv, all over the country. So right now I'm in an underground station, and just from here, like 3 kilometers from here, on the straight line, just going ahead, there are already places where Russians have put their missile launchers, and from these places they have been bombing the civilian parts of Kyiv, like for the past several days, and it's simply crazy. And just before going live with you, I've read the news and saw the updates about the bombing which are happening right now, or just has happened in Kyiv, and Russians are targeting civilian quarters all over Kyiv in different districts called Rusanivka, Kurinivka, Boyarka. These are places all over Kyiv. So the left bank, the right bank, the outskirts, the suburban area. So all over, and there are already, as the report says, 2 people dead and three injured in this attack. And these attacks are happening all the time, not only in Kyiv, every evening. And every evening we all think, how we will survive this. Will the morning come peacefully, or will we, have to, strive for our life to live to the morning? So the times are really very dangerous, very strange, and a lot of people, after seeing these images from Kharkiv here in Kyiv, understood that it's time to flee. And just today, 2 of my very close friends decided to go to the west because it's so dangerous, and one of these friends is also from Kharkiv, and the missile launch to the city center was just 7 minutes ago from her house, and I'm like, speechless and heartbroken for her and for all the people in Kharkiv, and just for all the Ukrainians who are going through this. And this really, not only this evening or night is surreal for me, but everything that is happening for these 6 days had been like a very bad nightmare, and we understand that it's not over. And the threat of Russians coming into the city is being talked all over the Kyiv city and social media. We see these pictures of Russian convoy being closer and closer to the center of Kyiv, and nobody understands what to do, where to run. We see the heroic pictures of our armed forces, which are really fighting back the Russians, but we understand that they are just stupid. They go, and nobody understands for what, and they just target civilians. A lot of casualties. Today is really a black day for all Ukrainians, a tragedy day, because so many civilian casualties here and there all over the country. Just really terrible and very complicated to just understand what is happening even.
Indeed. Well, look, thank you for your incredible work all week. We will be praying for you, Maria Pisarenko. Dennis, I hope your home survived. I hope your friends and family are okay. And I'm looking forward to checking in with both of you next week. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, coming up in Uncancelled, how much should we tell our innocent kids about the conflict in Ukraine and fears of nuclear war? Britain's strictest head teacher and social mobility czar, Catherine Birbalsingh, is tonight's Uncancelled at 10:40. But next, after President Zelensky made his dramatic call for foreign volunteers, we speak to one of the Brits heading to Ukraine to fight to defend the country against Russian invaders.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate.
From all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
Make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel.
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News. Let's return to tomorrow's News Tonight now on our Media Buzz. More front pages are in. The Daily Telegraph reports President Volodymyr Zelensky begged the West yesterday to intervene to stop a genocide in Ukraine after Russia intensified its bombing campaign. The Ukrainian president issued his plea after saying a missile had struck a television tower. I'll just hold this up for you because we've got it here, close to the Babanya Holocaust Memorial in Kiev. And I have to say, I'm really struck by the words from Alison Pearson at the top. Helpless, moved and mesmerised. Why we must aid the Ukrainian people in their hour of need. And I have to be honest, that is exactly how I feel. The Guardian leads with a harrowing photo of the rush for the last train out of Kiev as Putin's armies close in. It reported the piercing screams of children mixed with the shouts of soldiers desperately trying to stop a crush. The paper compares it to scenes from the Second World War. And of course, we long thought those sorts of scenes would be confined to history. But a couple more here in Pray for Kiev. Very powerful front page image from the Daily Mail. And the Sun sums it up in the way that only the Sun can, with a picture of Vladimir Putin and the strap headline, Barbaric. More in a moment with tonight's superstar panel, former editor of the Daily Star, Dawn Neeson, the Conservative commentator Calvin Robinson, and the author and journalist Rebecca Reed. But first, breaking tonight, the Pentagon has claimed the Russian invasion is progressing slower than anticipated as a result of poor morale, with troops running low on food and in some cases unaware they were even entering a combat situation. Here in the UK, Boris Johnson has made it clear there won't be boots on the ground in Ukraine, but that doesn't mean no Brits will be fighting against Russian attackers. In comments that have caused a bit of a backlash, although as far as I'm concerned, they've been blown wildly out of proportion, Foreign Secretary Liz Truss said she understood why citizens here would be compelled to put their lives at risk for our European neighbours.
The people of Ukraine are fighting for freedom and democracy, not just for Ukraine, but for the whole of Europe, because that is what President Putin is challenging. And absolutely, if people want to support that struggle, I would support them in doing that.
So you support Britain, people from Britain, going over to Ukraine to help in the fight?
Absolutely, if that's what they want to do.
Well, I'm joined now by one Brit who is planning to fly out, Joe Sterling, formerly of the Royal Regiment of Scotland. The ex-military man is set to meet two other former British soldiers in Ukraine after President Zelensky called for foreign volunteers to join the resistance. Joe Sterling, it is great to talk to you. This must have been quite a decision, Joe, given how dangerous it is in Ukraine.
Yeah, it's a risky decision the three of us have definitely made. Yeah, I'd agree with that.
So why did you decide to do it, Joe?
Speaking to my friend who's also going with me, if not us, then who? There's tragedies going on over there. There's war crimes being committed. Me and my friends are able to help put a stop to it. So why shouldn't we go?
Because you served in Afghanistan?
No, I served in Iraq.
Iraq, sorry. And so, you know, you're ready, but I guess you don't know what situation you're going to be walking into.
I've got a rough idea of what I've been speaking to people who are out on the ground now. Spoke to them this morning, but bigger picture, no, not really. I'd be a liar if I said I knew exactly what I was walking into.
When do you head out, Joe?
I fly out on Friday.
And you're prepared to die for this?
Well, hopefully not, but it's the risk you take, isn't it?
It is. Well, look, I have huge respect for you doing this. I think I can understand why you feel that visceral sort of need, given the terrible situation. I can only imagine, Joe, though, that you must have friends and family members saying, "You're crazy, don't do it, please don't leave."
Yeah, that's pretty much been the reaction from everybody. A lot of them, they don't. A lot of my family and friends don't understand it, but they support it, which is all I can really ask.
I think that's a perfect way to sum it up, Joe. I don't necessarily understand it, but my God, huge respect for you. Our brothers and sisters in Ukraine certainly need help. So good luck, and I hope that we can talk to you throughout the process if possible. If not, Joe, once you're back home safely. That was Joe Sterling, formerly of the Royal Regiment of Scotland, now volunteering to fight in Ukraine. Well, let me bring my superstar panel back in now. We've heard from Joe. We've seen how passionate he is about this cause. He has the necessary skills and training. So, Rebecca Reed, are Brits like him going out to fight in Ukraine brave or reckless, in your opinion?
I think you have to draw a very, very distinct line between Brits like him, who have served before, they know what a war zone looks like, they've got training, and Brits who have none of those things and think they're going to help. The latter camp, I think it's reckless and I think it's fundamentally unhelpful. The former camp, I fully don't understand it, but I imagine he's in no way going to inconvenience anybody else by being there. My concern is, I'm fairly pacifistic anyway, but the idea that you're going to go, hopefully help, but arrive with no infrastructure, no equipment, not necessarily have anywhere to stay, hopefully survive it, though let's be realistic, lots of people won't, and then come back fairly traumatised, probably, having been in a war zone, and there's no infrastructure to help you readjust back into society. It doesn't feel like a great system. I do deeply respect the bravery that it would take, but I don't necessarily think it's the most practical way that a person could help.
Calvin Robinson, what do you think?
I think Joe is clearly a very brave man. I'd like to think if we were ever invaded that I'd offer my services to fight for our nation. However, I don't think I'd go and fight abroad for another country's war. I do find that a little bit strange, but...
Well, he's obviously trained. I think that's very important to point out. And remember, he's not doing this unsolicited, Dawn. President Zelensky has asked for this help, in fact, has begged for this sort of help.
Yeah,
so he's going wanted. He's got the Foreign Secretary saying, I've got no problem with it. So he's not doing anything wrong.
No, and I'm assuming if Zelensky is asking for people to go and help, then there will be an infrastructure in place for them to properly help. I agree with Rebecca on this. I think if you have had military experience and you have served in war zones, then maybe it's a good thing if you want to go out there. But I think it's very dangerous for people that don't have that experience. I think they could be putting Ukrainian lives at risk by being inexperienced in the field. And I spent some time in Bosnia, Dan, and I am a little bit aware of how horrific it is. And I think, you can be all very gun-ho to start off with, but the reality of what it's like being in a war zone will affect you for the rest of your life.
And of course I wouldn't be recommending it, Rebecca, if he wasn't trained, but the point is this is someone who's fought for our army in Iraq. He's a young guy. He's recently served. It's not like pulling a bloke off the street to go and fight.
I don't want to speak on his personal decision because I respect that and I think he seems like a lovely man making a very brave choice. I more generally, not specific to him, am slightly worried about where young people's minds are at, that they are susceptible to wanting to go and take part in a war. I think possibly it speaks of maybe a lack of direction, a lack of purpose, and sometimes possibly the video gamification of war. And I'm worried about what happens when you get there if you don't have training and you realise war is hell.
Yeah, although, of course, these are people
and he does have training,
have
but
been
some
to
people
Iraq,
don't.
have been to Afghanistan, and I think that's a different situation. Now, this quick-thinking dad proved he ain't no rodeo clown after putting his life and body on the line to save his son from an out-of-control bull. So check this out. Brave Landis Hooks leapt out of the stands at a rodeo in Texas and protected his son Cody's body from being gored after the 18-year-old was thrown from the bull and knocked unconscious. So there you see the dad literally saved his life, right? Cody paid tribute to his quick-thinking father as he shared the clip on Instagram, writing, "It could have been a hell of a lot worse," and that is certainly putting it lightly. Texas. Do you know I'm going there tomorrow, Dawn?
Don't go near the balls, OK?
Are you jealous?
If you're stupid enough to do that, then I think you made your own bed, you lie in it. What a ridiculous activity.
I don't think Dan's going to do it. Really.
No, don't worry.
No.
Rebecca Reed, Calvin Robinson, Dawn Neeson, do stand by because coming up, I'll get my superstar panel to nominate for today's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass. But next, in Uncancelled, how much should we tell our innocent kids about the conflict in Ukraine and fears of nuclear war? Well, Britain's strictest head teacher and social mobility czar, Catherine Birbalsingh, is tonight's Uncancelled. But first, as I just mentioned, I'm away for a couple of days. I'll be in Texas, but never fear, Dan Wootton tonight will be left in the capable hands of GB News star Mark Dolan. He's here revealing what to expect on tomorrow night's show now.
Coming up tomorrow on Dan Wootton Tonight with me, Mark Dolan, royal author Robert Jobson, Spiked Online chief political writer Brendan O'Neill, and columnist extraordinaire Rod Liddle react to the big stories of the day. Plus plenty of feisty debate and some fun along the way with my superstar panel, including the Daily Mail columnist Amanda Platel, former candidate for London Mayor Sean Bailey, and political commentator and broadcaster Daisy McAndrew. And I'll be bringing you a first look at the newspaper first editions. That's Dan Wootton Tonight with me, Mark Dolan, Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. on GB News.
And I will be back next week. But it's time now for Uncancelled. And this is where Britain's top commentators speak out on controversial issues without the fear of the cancel culture sweeping the rest of the media. Now, tuck your shirt in and sit up straight, because my next guest is the strictest head teacher in Britain. Famous for her zero-tolerance policies in schools and no-excuses mantra, Catherine Birbalsingh also gained notoriety for railing against woke education policies and standing up to the liberal elite. The brave teacher rose to prominence at the Tory party conference, you might remember, back in 2010, with a speech about Britain's broken education system that keeps poor children poor, and spectacularly saying that underachievement by black pupils is due partly to the chaos of our classrooms and in part to the accusation of racism against teachers. Now, the comments blew up, she lost her job, but not one to be kept down by wokery. Catherine went on to set up the Michaela Free School in North West London. Now, one of the best performing in the country. And I'm delighted to say Catherine joins me now. And Catherine, look, I want to talk about your journey in just a moment. But first, of course, these are dark days in Ukraine. You've seen all of the breaking news tonight. And I thought it was really important to ask you how you're dealing with this situation in schools, but maybe more importantly, how you think parents should talk to their children about what's going on.
Yeah, well, it is very difficult. Children are understandably confused and don't really know what's happening. I mean, the best advice I can give to parents is to use it as an opportunity to look at some of the history of the region, to sit down and watch some news on television with their children and talk about the issues. It's one of the things I try and advise parents with regularly, which is that you want to do stuff with your children. When I say stuff, learning stuff, so that they know that you're interested in ideas, and whether that could be politics, it could be history, it could even be maths. But this is. They'll be interested because, of course, people are talking about this. And even if you don't know that much, this is an opportunity for you to go online and do some research together and find out about the history of the region and what's happening, and the history of Russia there, and why there is this issue happening, and so on. It's a way in to sparking an interest in history and politics generally, is what I'd say.
No, I think that's a very good point. Now, look, the moniker Britain's strictest teacher doesn't come lightly, but having read into your career, Catherine, and the way that you instill discipline in your students, I think it's probably fair enough, and I think it's something you should be proud of, actually, that moniker. Explain to me why you think so many modern-day schools have moved away from discipline in the classroom being a guiding principle.
Yeah, well, it's because people see being strict as being mean. And actually, I would say that when you're strict, it's because you love the children, and you keep your standards high for them. And children can't possibly learn when other kids are talking. And sometimes, depending on the intake at your school, if you're in a school that has a tough intake, perhaps in the inner city, you're going to have more than just kids talking around you. Kids will be hitting each other, fights will be breaking out, lots of disruption. kids swearing at the teacher, undermining the teacher, and all of that happening is not conducive to learning. You know, it's interesting. Just today, one of my teachers who used to work outside of London, further up north, she was saying to me that when she came to our school and she did her first lesson with a year 8 class and they were doing Romeo and Juliet, and she said to me just today, she said, you know, I really don't think it's any exaggeration to say that one lesson that I taught, we covered more material and learned more in that one lesson than we would have done in an entire half term at my old school. Now, parents will be listening thinking, well, that's ridiculous. How can that be possible? Even I sort of said, really? Is that really true? And while I know that obviously we cover a lot in our lessons, for her to have said to me, one lesson in comparison to lessons in an entire half term, which is 6 weeks of lessons. And you just think, wow, how is that possible? And of course, one of the big reasons is because our children are so well behaved.
Well,
and
yes,
so
and they have to be, don't they? They have to be, because your rules are very strict. I mean, you're not allowed to utter even a word when you're walking down the corridor between classroom to classroom. I think even if you're a few seconds late to class, you get a detention. I mean, this is a no tolerance policy, right, when it comes to behaviour.
Yeah, and what that means is that the children are just behaving. I mean, so it's not that there are tons, people are talking in the corridors, because we've got these silent corridors, and people say they're silent, but actually there are teachers everywhere who are saying good morning and good afternoon all the time. So they're sort of silent and they're sort of not. But what isn't happening is children sort of chatting and taking their time to get to lessons. And people might think, well, why do you have to go to be so extreme? Well, the fact is, it means that in a minute and a half, that transition takes place. Children are then learning in their lessons, and they're learning much more than they might do elsewhere because they're in their lessons earlier. Now, you might think, oh, but it's only a difference of a couple of minutes. Not necessarily. You know, in some places, it could take 10, 15 minutes before the corridor is clear and the children are in lessons learning. But not only that, they arrive to the lessons calm and they're ready to learn. Their heads are in it. So again, you don't then spend another 10 minutes in the lesson trying to calm them down and get them focused. So when this teacher of mine says, look, we learned so much in that one lesson in comparison to my last school where it took weeks to learn the same thing, that's part of the reason. Now, it's also our teaching methods that we are very keen on getting through things and getting kids understanding, and the children, but the children are able to be engaged. So then there's a culture of children's hands are up all the time. One of the things the guests come, we have 600 visitors that come every year, and they say, wow, there's so many hands up. The children are so engaged with the learning. I've never seen this before. And of course, that drives the learning. So more and more is being covered. More and more the children are interested and the enthusiasm is sparked.
Yeah.
So far from being the miserable place where children are, it's all strict and sad, really exciting and happy. That's what people don't necessarily understand.
But strictly no phones and no social media whatsoever. You're very worried about what these apps like TikTok, Instagram, you're worried about what they're doing to our young folk.
Yeah, so advice that I would give to your parents listening is don't give your child a smartphone. And I know that can be very hard, especially the older the child gets, the child thinks, oh, but all my friends are on there, everyone's on Instagram, everyone's on Snapchat, I'm missing out. If you have the backbone as a parent to hold out, don't give them the smartphone. Now, it's not just that we don't have phones in school, because there are other schools that do that. We go to the extent of saying to families, don't have the phones at home. And we sell brick phones at school. We actually buy them in for £14 and we sell them at £10. So we make a loss on the phone. And what's a brick phone? It allows you to telephone your child. You can text your child. So you still have the convenience of a phone, but it doesn't give them unsupervised access to the internet. And that's so key.
Now, I wanted to...
children... Yeah, go on.
Well, no, I just wanted to talk to you, moving on from the technology side of things, to the issue of victimhood. Because one thing that you're very strong on is that you don't want your ethnically diverse pupils, notably black pupils, to feel like they're victims. And that approach seems to have garnered a lot of academic success for your pupils, because your university entrance rates are among the best in the country. So I presume you are very opposed to critical race theory. You're very opposed to teachers who want to talk about issues like Black Lives Matter in schools?
Yeah, so what I would say is you want to teach historically. So notice when we were talking about Ukraine, I said, look at the history of the country, look at the history of that entire region and talk about these ideas with your child. It's the same when we're teaching British history at Michaela. We very much involve all the different cultures that need to be involved when teaching that. So we look at Gandhi in India, or we might teach the Mau Mau Rebellion in Kenya, and we teach civil rights in America because that's not so much British history, but on the world stage, it's important to have the cultural knowledge around Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King and so on. Now, all of this stuff, yes, can be taught at school. What you don't want is assembly after assembly saying to children, life is really hard. You've got all these obstacles in front of you because you're Black, or because you're disabled, or because you're female, or because whatever the reason might be, because you're poor. And so all of these obstacles mean that really, you're a bit of a victim, and it's too hard for you to sort of make it. Because if that's all children hear, they will internalize that, and they will give up. And they will take other routes to try and be successful. When I say other routes, they'll be super chatty in class. They won't make an effort with their GCSEs. They'll think, I'm not part of the establishment. So one of the things that we really push at school, because we're a multicultural community, fine, that's good. All of our children are from different backgrounds. You've got children who have backgrounds from the Middle East, and some from Asia, and some from Africa, and some from the Caribbean, and some from Eastern Europe, and all over. In order to pull us all together, we all need to be British. And
yes,
so
I love that. I love that. I could speak to you all day. But Catherine, that's the note I'm going to end it on. Britain's strictest head teacher, please come back very soon. I think you're amazing.
Thank you very much.
But it's time now to reveal today's greatest Britain and Union jackass. My superstar panel are back with me. Dawn Neeson, your greatest Britain nominee.
It's an honorary Greatest Britain. It is Ukrainian President Zelensky for
the reasons we've been discussing tonight. Calvin Robinson, your nominee.
Her Majesty the Queen. God save the Queen. She recovered from the cold.
And Rebecca Reid.
David Amos, because Southend has now become a city, which was what he always wanted. Yay.
Well, I'm going to go with Sir David Amos tonight, because I think it was a very important day for the folk in Southend, and he would have been so delighted. Union jackass time. Dawn, you've got another honorary nominee.
Honorary, yeah, obviously Putin, absolutely no competition.
Calvin Robinson.
Lord Hall, for heading up the BBC pay inquiry whilst being invested in the BBC, as are most of the people on the panel.
And Rebecca Reid, your nominee.
Matt Hancock, still with the polo neck and the jeans.
And this was because he did an interview with the podcast this week.
Yes, he fell in love, and we all understand that. But what is the outfit? I don't understand that.
Plus the adultery.
Well, to me,
mostly the polo.
There is only one Union jackass, not just of the day, but clearly of the week, and it's Mad Vlad. And I think we know why. We know why. Go on. There's nothing more to say. My superstar panel, Dawn Neeson, Calvin Robinson, Rebecca Reid, thank you so much. I'm off for a few days. Mark Dolan will be here tomorrow night, so do keep him company. Thank you so much for being with me this week. Headliners is next. Good night.
Hello again. After a sunny day today across the north, it's going to be a rather grey day for most places tomorrow, but it will still be sunny across the northwest of Scotland, where this area of high pressure will hold on. But further south, low pressure is moving in. These weather fronts bringing a pretty wet evening across southwest England, but that rain on this weather front is continuing to track northwards, so spreading into parts of South Wales and across the Midlands also, and eventually into North Wales and northwest England too. But much of northern England, Northern Ireland, Scotland having a dry night with the clear skies persisting across Scotland, turning cold out there by dawn. We will see a fairly widespread frost, but further south, look at that 7 in Cardiff and Southampton to
start Wednesday, but it will start pretty dull and pretty damp here. Further outbreaks of rain trickling northward, so a very different day over northern England, North Wales, and the rain will spread into Northern Ireland as well. So gone will be today's sunny skies. We will hold on to them across northern Scotland, but we will see cloud and eventually even some rain trickling into central and southern Scotland too. Not much rain across eastern England. Much of the day will be dry here. Quite mild in the south. We could get to 12